groups of babies. The first group of babies have jaundice that goes up very quickly early on in life, the first day or two of life. Okay? So some babies will get very jaundiced in day 1 or the first 24 or 36 hours. So very early severe jaundice can be a real problem. Now, how would we know that this baby has a high level of jaundice? How would you know? How would you know that somebody was very jaundiced? What would you notice?
By identifying the eyes.
Yeah, okay. So, in a white baby, it might be quite obvious because all of their skin in their head might start going a bit yellow. But in a darker baby, a darker skinned baby, it's harder to spot. But you're absolutely right, the whites of your eyes can look quite yellow and quite jaundiced. Okay? One of the strange things that we see, and I don't understand why this happens, but in more severely jaundiced babies, it seems that more of the body gets jaundiced. So in babies who are severely jaundiced, you might notice that the bottoms of their feet start to look yellow. In babies who are less jaundiced, you might notice that their palms look yellow. And in a baby who is jaundiced, you will notice it in the whites of their eyes will look a more yellowy colour. So if you see yellow there, you want to examine the baby and look at their hands, look at their body, look at the soles of their feet, and you might want to think, is this baby severely jaundiced? And what would you do if you thought that they were jaundiced? Well, yes sir?
Yeah, you expose this child, if you suspect that there is jaundice, you expose the child to where there is light.
Okay, so that's the treatment, you're absolutely right. But before the treatment, you might do a blood test. So if you're working in a place where you can do liver function tests, and where you can do a jaundice check, it's worth checking how high is that level. Okay? So I don't know where you're going to end up working, but some of you will end up working in places where you can do a liver function test and where you can do a jaundice check. And that's something that we would do very regularly to measure that before we start a treatment like I say. Okay? So, we'll notice that the baby looks jaundiced. We might do a blood test. And then we have to think, well, why is this happening? And the first group is the group that are jaundiced very early on. And in those ones, we worry about something called hemolysis. Okay? Does anybody know what hemolysis means? Yeah? No? Destruction of the blood cells. So those red cells that I drew are getting broken up very quickly, and that can cause a problem. Now sometimes that can be caused by something in the cells themselves. There are certain conditions, genetic conditions that can cause it. Sometimes it's because there's been a blood group problem between the mother and the baby, and that can cause jaundice. And sometimes you can have hemolysis just because the baby is very sick. So whenever we see day 1 jaundice, we're always thinking about hemolysis. But one of the important things we think about whenever we see it is we think about sepsis. And this is why it's really important. If you see a baby and you're worried that they're jaundiced, you don't just give them some light therapy or whatever. You actually assess them properly and you think, is this a sick baby? Could this be a septic baby? And it's really important that we think about that. Okay? Now, the second group of babies that we think about are the very severe jaundice, very high levels of jaundice. Okay? And that can happen in a baby who's unwell for any reason. If they're not feeding, if they're dehydrated, if they're septic, or if they've got hemolysis problems. So again, if you see a baby in day 2, 3 or 4 and it's looking very jaundiced, the whites of its eyes are very yellow, the soles of its